Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ETBFSI CXO Conclave. I hope you have been enjoying the session so far. And today, here in this session, I bring to you some great conversation around bankers' chariot riding on technology. Banks all over the world are synced with digital, but in the new normal world, the future of the banks will be determined by the 4x5-inch smartphone. How are decade-old banks converting to this new paradigm? How are they crafting this strategy from shifting data to using AI and incorporating the whole ecosystem? And most importantly, what are the security implications of this new paradigm as it leaves the attack surface open wider and more vulnerable? In this chat, we will try to explore a 360-degree view of how banks are riding technology to fuel growth and innovation. I have the pleasure of having Mr. Lakshminarayanan, CIO and Group Head IT for HDFC Bank as the panelist. I also have with me Hiral Sharma, Senior Cybersecurity Advisor for McAfee on the panel. Welcome, Mr. Lakshminarayanan, and welcome, Hiral. Mr. Lakshminarayanan, I want to start with you. And if you really look at the post-pandemic landscape, banks have seen a significant acceleration in their ongoing digital transformation journeys owing to the new operating and workforce models and changing socioeconomic habits of consumers, which is leaning heavily towards digital. So what have been the most notable technology disruptions within the banking sector in general? And specifically, if you can also talk about how HDFC Bank in particular in the last 1.5 years has been driving these digital disruptions.
Thanks, Shipra, and it's a pleasure to be on this forum. And what we are seeing clearly is a tectonic shift, and the shift is happening on multiple fronts. So if you look at the entire spectrum, you have the employee experience, which is very different today. People wanting to work from home. Banking, for example, which was a very, very closed industry, doing a lot of activities like funds transfer, account authorization, and things like that. Which were deemed as risky, earlier on, had to be done from home. So there are very different experience out there. The clients themselves completely, again, very, very different experience. And it again cut across whether it was opening an account or servicing an existing client relationship. Everything had to be moved digital. And here too, if you see, the adoption was again segmented. Suddenly, even senior citizens, or people from rural areas who are normally not very active on the digital channel had to adopt themselves. So fundamentally, the banks had to kind of rethink the way they were servicing the customer, because earlier, if you look at it, the digital was largely, centered around payments, around millennial account servicing, and generally the population that's very digital friendly. Suddenly, you have to think very differently. How do I ensure my customer journeys are very different for segments that are hitherto not used to a digital, platform? So I think 2 or 3 things fundamentally shifted. One, the journey building, what I call the entire rethinking of the journey. See, that's where it started. No longer a drop. One is, of course, the interfaces. When we talk about the journey, it starts with the interface, just the interface itself. How easy is it? How quickly you can use it? Mobile became absolutely at the center of the strategy. Then, of course, the next part was the journey was one part, but the experience. I mean, no longer a drop in the floor or a break in the process kind of approach was acceptable. People wanted an account to be open. It has to be done on a real-time basis, right? And there were certain issues because regulatorily we were not ready to kind of do that. And as the pandemic unraveled, and then things kind of became more and more clear that it's not going to be short-term thing, we saw regulators reacting very positively, whether it's video KYC and the entire eKYC journey got very digitized, so to say, and that helped. I mean, today not just savings account but even current account, right? And it's not just for the individual, even for the person who's running a business of it. So I think the second part that changed, one is of course the look and feel of the journey, the experience. The second is the entire flow. The flows had to be largely fully digitized. And again, a lot of banks were digitized earlier, but they were break journeys. So an account opening would come to a certain stage and then drop on the floor and then come back. And that was no longer acceptable. On the other side, on the asset side, people wanted to get to shopping in a very different experience. Even smallest of the items that people were buying, it had to be digitized, and nobody today uses wallets, right? I mean, just see the revolution. I mean, just from the fact that today, if you forget your wallet, you are absolutely fine as long as you have your mobile in your hand, right? And that's the kind of situation that we have reached today. So if you put all of these three things together, and then if you couple it with some of the other things that have happened, like I said, the regulatory norms changing, the UPI at the center of the revolution, the way the digital explosion happened, I think it's been a very remarkable journey. I mean, the volumes have shot up. And HDFC Bank obviously has been at the center of it. We were fairly digitized, so to say, from the beginning. At least our positioning and our pitch in the market has always been around the digitization part. But as I said, we still had to do a lot of heavy lifting to put it into the stage that we are in today. So if you look at it today, we are probably at about 90% plus digitization. But what we are doing is, and I'll talk about it probably later, is we are reimagining. So while we are doing the digitization of our existing platforms, which is continues to be very, very, I would say, active effort and kind of a regular sprint, we are also reimagining some of our technology to adapt to the 3-year or 4-year down the journey, right? Because you have to really look at both the aspects, the continuing aspect of what you can service now, and where do you go from there. And of course, center of this comes the security aspects, the cyber security aspect, because again, multiple facets to the digital journey, right? There is just the fact that the security of the employees accessing from home to basically a lot of digital applications in the mobile, which is a very different form factor, to basically hosting applications in the cloud, which is another angle to the entire security aspect, right? So if you look at it, the entire security landscape, right from an employee experience to the customer experience to our own, technology solutioning, I think huge amount of disruptions happening in that area. And that's why it's a very, so if you again put back the journey, the customer experience and the security architecture, all three have gone through a tremendous disruption. And clearly, we are seeing more and more products being rolled out with a fully digitized thought process, which is kind of serving for the future, so to say.
Thank you. So very well said. And you've really, with those three buckets that you pointed out, you've really brought about how the disruption has happened across the banking landscape. And I will come to more on that. So Hiral, you heard Mr. Lakshminarayanan talk about the kind of digital disruptions that has been happening across the banking and financial services sector. Now, if you look at how the banks are embracing digital technologies at speed and at scale, including cloud in the last 18 months to cater to the massive jump in digital transactions during the pandemic. It also means greater leeway for cyber criminals to launch highly sophisticated attacks. So what are you seeing as the topmost cybersecurity challenges and new cyber threats that banks need to be prepared to address?
Sure, Shipra. Thank you so much for that question. And great thought, Mr. Lakshminarayanan. I absolutely agree to that. And not only me, I think as an organization, McAfee globally, this is what we have been seeing since everything has gone to digital platform. And he specifically highlighted key 3 points, and I would want to relate and extend to the similar points which he highlighted. The very first one, he spoke about the employee experience, right? So imagine, let's say HDFC Bank in the previous stage, if HDFC Bank had limited branches wherein the employees were coming and operating from a particular time slot, and they were to manage those branches. And of course, there is a network and security control, which we call in terminology perimeter controls, which were put in. Now, every employee is working from home. So number of employees have become number of branches to manage for HDFC. So that's an internal IT security challenge that needs to be catered, which is the very first one, which is what he highlighted, absolutely right. Second point, when it comes to the digitization of application, critical data such as payments. He also highlighted digital KYC, the video KYC. The whole crux of everything remains the data, which is again a PII information, which is personal identification information, which is very, very critical to protect. So the first is to protect your all internal, network. Second, again, the critical application authentication and the data protection part of it. Third, very, very importantly, he highlighted how the transformation on technological side is happening. Some of the examples which he highlighted was cloud adoption, right? We never heard before the pandemic thing, there was a term called cloud native threats. Now, if you see, so globally we run a survey, okay, that's across the different verticals that highlights what kind of cloud adoption has happened in those verticals. So specifically in BFSI segment globally, we have seen that cloud services predominantly, which involve, the sharing, the collaboration part of it, the cloud emailing, stuff like that, such as, Office 365, one of the collaboration tools that right now we are using, which is Zoom, WebEx. All of these tools have increased by 36%. That's the global thing in terms of cloud service usage. But if you look at the similar report, you would be surprised to know, and again, a data point here, the cloud threats, specifically in BFSI segment, were increased by 571%, which is huge. Because the reason is simple, the network boundaries are no more defined. It's all borderless now. So the attackers have found out new ways to get in and penetrate, at times by using legitimate credentials. They're using absolutely legitimate credential to enter and then try and penetrate the network and harm in the way data exfiltration has happened. We have seen many examples like that. The recent ones I can highlight, but to talk about it, the network perimeter part of it. Second, the data protection requires a complete different approach now. The on-premise solutions do not have context of identifying what's happening in cloud. When the collaboration is happening in cloud, they do not understand the terminology. So how do you make sure that current solution expands to those boundaries and provide protection? And third, last but very, very important thing is the threat prevention front, wherein the malware, the attackers are, exploiting the cloud native services.
Thanks, Hiral. So, when I heard both of you, it was like, it is all about reimagining your customer experience journeys, reimagining your operational journeys, and reimagining your security around these changes that are happening in the customer experience journeys as well as the operational journeys. So, Mr. Lakshminarayanan, you spoke about this, the new frontiers that we saw in the last 1.5 years. But let me take a step ahead and go further. What, according to you, is going to be the new paradigm for banks going forward, and what will be those new frontiers of disruption which this will be driving? For instance, do you think that in the new normal world, the future of the banks will be determined by a 4x5-inch smartphone? And how is HDFC Bank preparing for these disruptions and maybe driving some new disruptions?
So obviously the problem statement is clear: digital explosion, ubiquitous access of devices that serve banking. Clearly a huge amount of conversion of the traditional users into digital platform. So obviously all of this also means certain things that kind of are different, right? One, the banking industry is finally seeing the volumes that the big techs, and the social media and the e-commerce platforms have seen. It's a very different place to be in. You're probably doing 7 to 8 touch points a day today on your new ways of payment, right? So fundamentally, the volumes have jumped. That means the banking industry has to rethink the kind of technology platforms they kind of built on. So it's not possible just to be on-prem classical technology, which is largely what I call as the Java-led platforms, which is typically which was good for a large part of the last 20 years. But suddenly the shift has happened. Today you have to go to cloud native, container ready, microservices-led stacks, which allow you elastic scaling. So what are you expecting? You're suddenly expecting at 7x, 10x volume growth. And these are again spurts. Again, to top it up, there are seasonalities, whether it's month ends, whether it is festival seasons. And then, just the sheer scale and at which the digital explosions happened, it has meant that we have to reimagine our technology thought processes. So again, that also links back to the question on HDFC Bank. And I mentioned that. So the way we are thinking is slightly different. while we continue to pursue the digital journeys through APification. So really we continue to kind of go and more digitize our applications through the API gateway, talking to our core banking applications. That continues to happen because you have to continue, you have to compete in the market, and you have to continue to put new assets every couple of months in that sense. But what we are also fundamentally rethinking is our next set of technology applications. So what we have done is we've created the organization. In fact, we've been very vocal of late in the market, and we've spoken about this very extensively, what we call as a digital and enterprise factory strategy, which largely what we are doing is we're saying, okay, let's say if we are at zero level, we have to start from the beginning. Imagine today there is no HDFC bank, the giant it is. And imagine we are going back to the startup world. How would we build our applications? I mean, it's as simple as a question like that. So what we are doing here is we are basically recreating our change organization through this digital and enterprise factory. And what these factories will bring to the table is the new design thought process, whether it's active design, whether it's cloud ready, cloud native design, microservices, loosely coupled architecture, horizontal scale on databases. All of this is available today in the cloud world, and we have to adapt to that. So we have started in that journey. All our application developments now are happening through this factory, which are fundamentally cloud native ready, and even the languaging. So no longer, today you have options to go to Golang, options to kind of look at Flutter, React kind of, platforms, which are very different in its technology construct. So what we are doing is we are again looking at these factories to rebuild these applications. And most of this rebuilding is happening either in partnership with, again, not the traditional large services kind of players. We are kind of reimagining either some of the areas we are going and rewriting our own platforms, or there are places we are tying it with exciting new scaling up kind of startups, or in some places even going to a 10-man startup because they have that IP. Because today the world is flat. A 10-member startup could be providing a far deeper technology than a 10,000 people giant company, right? And we have to kind of harness that. So these factories are running a series of our projects, be it things like mobile rewrite, be it things like new payment application, our customer channel experience platform. So all of this we're reimagining on the change side. So obviously, as we go along in the next few, and you'll start seeing some of these rollouts very soon, in fact, as soon as next few months. And these will all be cloud ready, container driven applications. Of course, the journey is long because the number of application ecosystem itself is very large in a bank like ours. But over next, I would say 24 to 36 months, you will continue to see this large transformation of new and exciting kind of applications coming through. Obviously, that also brings in, like you said, the form factor question that you asked. I think the biggest challenge in the form factor is not technology. I mean, today there is enough and more technology available to make it great UI, UX experiences, fast experiences, very, very savvy journeys, so to say. I think all of that is available. I think the biggest threat is security. Okay, and that's the reality, because as this device goes in hands, the mobiles go in the hands of more and more people. See, the awareness context and the threat surface area both have increased, because frankly the number of mobiles that are coming through so surface area has obviously gone up. Plus also the awareness, right? Because it's not an easy. So while we today think the kind of security threats that we see, whether it is a remote mirroring of applications, whether it is localization of your data stores in your mobile, hijacking of your sessions, social engineering attack, all of that are fundamentally very, very easy things to do. I mean, you don't need real hackers to do that. I mean, simple smart people can do this, and that's what is happening. So if you see the banking, so while all this growth has happened in the last 1.5 years, we've also seen a lot of increase in fraud, whether it's on the UPI side, whether it's on the traditional payment side. So industry is grappling. So we started with basically two-factor, went to device binding, but all of that is changing today. We have to move to what is called as remote access server protection solutions. We have to get to what we call as adaptive authentication. I think the key is to get security right, because I think that's where the trust factor from the banks will come. But the technology from a rollout perspective, what kind of capability? I think that will get rapidly built up. So I think the challenges are largely around, if you ask me, scale for sure, and that can be solved through the cloud, and then huge focus on the security area. If you ask me. So fundamentally, that's where we are going.
So first of all, your digital factory that you spoke about and the kind of work that is happening there, that sounds really exciting. And as you said, over the next few months, we will start seeing rollouts, and that will also mean some new services at the front end coming, new and innovative services coming from the bank for its customers, which will have this digital factory and its innovations at the back end. And secondly, when you spoke about security, I'm really glad that you brought a lot of focus around security, and that is going to be actually the key for banks to build in that resiliency within the innovations that they are driving. So Hiral, what are some of the approaches that you would recommend for banks to adopt in order to be better protected? Also, if you can highlight some of the benefits that your global and Indian BFSI customers have probably gained by implementing these approaches.
So first comes the approach part of it. There's no, one approach fits all the customer. That's not true. But largely, if you see, so fundamentally, what Mr. Lakshminarayanan again spoke, I would again relate and try and answer in the expected way. So very first thing that he spoke about is the cloud adoption, which is unsaid, and to have the business agility which is a demand for today, the cloud adoption is must to have, right? As we move on to cloud, and I highlighted some of the critical points in the previous section as well, right? So we have three different things. So the very first part that I highlighted was about data. So again, I would highlight as to how do we maintain that data protection? Specifically, as he said, the more and more devices which are unmanaged devices, mobile, handsets, everything is growing up a lot. So how do we take care of a consistent data protection, which is across the form factors of unmanaged device, managed device, coming in from the employee, coming in from the user, also going in cloud at a central position, so that you define your business requirement once from a bank's perspective. Let's say your critical data should not be shared apart from your own team member somewhere outside. So how do you make sure that's there? Because, let's take again an example of HDFC Bank again, Mr. Lakshminarayanan, I would look to highlight that. Let's say one of the collaboration services that you might be using, I'm not too sure as to what your existing deployment is, but hypothetically, let's say one of the collaboration tool you must be utilizing, all the chats, all the sensitive data, at times the links that we share, the collaboration details are all kept within, just to give you an example right there, right? Now, if one of the department person wants to invite a third-party vendor, let's say, as a guest to the particular collaborative meeting, now entire data of the previous transcript is still kept there. So unlike, your data, which is supposed to be not to be shared, but somebody joins in as a guest, has a complete visibility as to what was shared, which is unknown to you and which was unintentional also. I'm not blaming the employee who brought in the guest user, but that's there. So natively also, this collaboration services, the cloud providers do not have the control mechanism to look into it. So as McAfee have developed such use cases which are predominantly defined for such cloud protection, which is the data protection part of it. Similarly, the threat prevention part of it. Let's say, he highlighted one of the points. Since the awareness is not there, people are misutilizing the information which is there. So how do we take care of that data part? The threat prevention module, last but not the least, the converging network security brought together. Because scalability has to be given, agility needs to be maintained. So considering all of that, how do we build in an approach which consolidates all of that and provides a convergence? Because the more and more tools and technology you deploy, there is going to be a complexity of integration. So how do we address that? That's the approach that we take. And that's how I would like to, highlight the best approaches possible. From a reference perspective, some of the large private sector banks, specifically I would talk about India because that's the context for today. Some of the large private sector banks, some equivalent to HDFC, have implemented similar use cases. One of which why I highlighted, if you have a collaboration tools, there are archive data which is kept there. So how do you go ahead and scroll across and find out what is the critical information shared there? As an organization, as in specifically the banks, the departments are humongous, right? So you have to share your information accordingly. So how do you maintain that granular policy controls are natively given in the solution, which is unique in industry? No one in the industry currently offering such services. And then we have thought across that because have seen those challenges coming in from the customers, specifically last thing. So such references are already available. Many of the large banks, private sector banks, as well as PSU banks, some of the critical organization, critical infrastructures of India are also, evaluating us, and they already have our footprint available from a digitalization perspective. So I can't name some of the references here, but as I said, these are the use cases which are already implemented with McAfee as a security provider there. And the best approach, as I said, is the convergence approach that we are trying to build.
So, Hiral, great that I specifically want to go to the example that you gave of, let's say, an employee of an organization on a collaboration chat platform invites a third-party vendor into a chat and the kind of risk it poses. So, I want to take it a step further. So, Mr. Lakshminarayanan, what we are seeing is that if we really talk about digital disruption, it is not happening in isolation. Maybe it used to happen in isolation a few years back, but today, in today's dynamic environment, it definitely is no longer happening in isolation. And that means that banks need to explore the entire ecosystem when it comes to riding on technology. So, how can banks, effectively drive a more holistic and collaborative digital agenda that incorporates the whole ecosystem? However, at the same time, ensuring that it does not mitigate those third-party risks that comes with this kind of collaboration. Because today we are seeing banks collaborating with a lot of fintech companies. We're talking about an open API architecture wherein you are collaborating with a lot of components in the entire ecosystem. So how do you do that in a more digitally enable the entire ecosystem, but at the same time mitigate the third-party risks?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, Shipra, because that's shifting again away from the customer side of the digital journey that we spoke about. So one is, of course, the elements around the customer journey and customer side of the disruption. Second is the employee side of the digital disruption that we spoke about. A third part is how do your partners kind of work through this, right? So that's the next logical part that you spoke about. So I think there again, it's very critical because the way the development methodologies have changed today. And it has two parts to it. One, the fact that today the expectations of putting up solutions have changed today. Nobody wants to wait for, so you to tell people that it will take 6 months, 9 months to develop a solution. I think it's a very, very, old school of thought. I don't think anybody is wanting to wait for that today. So the development methodologies have changed, right? And we call about agile in a big way. We called it out, but if you fundamentally look at it, getting your partner ecosystems to work with you in a mode that makes the entire development agile and secure and scalable and all, but largely if you're to use that option, how do you run your DevSecOps, right? That's the fundamental bridge to this whole discussion. Obviously, paradigms shifting today. You are putting a lot of applications on cloud, so you obviously would expect that these pipelines are from the vendor side, from the partner side, are extending into your cloud network. You have absolutely fully automated toll gates, right from simple security, assessment through SaaS tools, getting into the entire pipeline in terms of penetration and black box testing, and all the way up to production deployment and further scans from there on. Right, the entire piece, the DevOps piece, has gone through a huge change today. I mean, today you expect the entire ecosystem to be so right from the partner to the release teams, to the testing teams, to the production deployment teams, completely sitting on the pipeline and highly automated and secure pipelines, right? That is the real change that's happening, if you ask me. And that's a very big change for lot of large organizations. It's very easy to do in a startup, put DevSecOps pipeline, because there aren't any precedents, so to say, to change. And there are no policy regulation. I would say there is there, but it's not to the extent that some of the banking industry follows. So that is another area that's coming through a huge digital disruption. So look at all the security testing, all of the deployments, the performance testing. All of that is also getting, so to say, automated and digitized. And what does it do? It helps you to make yourself agile and be able to make your releases faster. Today, as I said, every fintech today prides itself either on ability to kind of keep releasing new versions on mobile every few weeks, or being able to put a new kind of technology which is guided by AI ML kind of platforms. Again, every now and then, right? And those kind of things can be achieved only when you build a digital ecosystem that is secure and that feeds into this whole journey seamlessly, so to say. And then you are able to churn out products faster, secure, and in a more agile way, so to say.
Hiral, from your perspective, when we are seeing banks increasingly operating in a large ecosystem and dependent on multiple stakeholders working together, what are the kind of risk factors are you seeing? So, when moving towards a collaborative approach, it also increases the third-party security risks. And how do you suggest that banks address these to ensure resiliency in their operations?
Sure. So I think, as more and more security, rather, I would say the cloud tools are getting adopted and hence the security tools, right? So today I spoke about network getting transformed completely. Mr. Lakshminarayanan also highlighted the adoption of some of the leading names like Office 365, the G Suites. So you have different multiple vendors coming in. And of course, that's required from an agility perspective, as he highlighted. But imagine if you have the similar approach from a security perspective. So you need a vendor which can provide the networking part of it. You need another vendor which can provide security controls. Again, for on-premise, which is, as we spoke about the data center security part of it, the cloud part of it. So if you have a cloud visibility tool, let's say, and existing tools which do not get extended to the other levels, the only option you have is to integrate these tools, right? So more and more tools you have, or rather more and more security vendors you have, the complexity of integration is always there. And also, what are we trying to achieve from integration, right? So integration, again, is very subjective term, as we speak about. Integration is just from the management perspective that, you will have a central console wherein you can just see certain things being there. While as the entire focus should be on convergence. So when I say convergence, it delivers the specific use cases. I will again take the same example and extend the previous example here. Let's take, the same example of defining a particular data as critical. Now you've defined the data once as critical. Now, whatever channels are there from a vector coverage perspective, be it a cloud vector, be it your endpoint vector, be it your unmanaged device vector, once it is defined, it should be applicable to all the vectors seamlessly. And that's where your skill shortage part of it will also get addressed, right? Second part, which is very, very important. Now, today, when we talk about convergence, the security tool, and sir highlighted the AI enabled part of it, right? So what are the advantages that we get from an AI enabled technology perspective? Tool should have capability to give the human inputs to it, which is what we call it human machine teaming. So if you have human machine teaming, wherein the tools can guide the people, right? Because cybersecurity skill shortages is inevitable. All of us are aware that however we are talking about cybersecurity, specific skills around the cloud security part of it, the visibility part of it, user behavioral analysis part of it is not very, very easily available. So if the tools have capability to guide the L1, L2 engineers, which are your level 1, level 2 engineers, if you have a particular incident, how do you deal with that incident? So usually in terminologies like security operations centers, I'm sure HDFC must have implemented some of the SOC playbooks, right? In the case, let's say if something happens like that, what are the procedures to follow to take the relevant actions? And then that will go through the maturity cycle. All of that knowledge should be built into the tools, which can provide the human machine teaming, the guided investigation part of it, and of course the convergence from which I would like to reiterate my 3 points: data protection, threat protection, and the network security part of it. All built in together, which I think provide the better approach and also take care of the complexity in the multi-stack environment and the collaborative approaches. Also, for all the listeners out here, apart from what we're addressing, one of the key things from McAfee standpoint, what we can do is we can actually help you just run through a report, which is cloud security risk assessment. There could be scenario wherein you might have not done the visibility checks properly because cloud is very skeptical, right? So what kind of visibility are provided? We can actually run you through that report. We can do a sample report specifically, Mr. Lakshminarayanan, for you. We would like to have that discussion with HDFC wherein, we can come down and just do a risk assessment for you, and we will give you the report as to what are the risk factors associated when you go for such adoption. from a containerization perspective, from IaaS, PaaS deployment perspective, from collaboration tool perspective, even shadow IT, which is not allowed as an enterprise cloud services, but users might have utilized. So all of those things are available, and we are more than happy to run that report for you. Just reach out to us, and we would be happy to help you there.
Great. Thank you so much, Hiral. I would like to wrap up the discussion here. Thank you, Mr. Lakshminarayanan and Hiral for some great insights and thoughts. I think we truly covered when I in the beginning when I spoke about a 360-degree view, we did cover the 360-degree view of technology adoption. From the customer experience perspective, from the employee perspective, as well as from the entire ecosystem perspective. And going forward, while I would not really, in fact, none of us would be able to predict what will happen 2 years or 3 years down the line, because technologies are changing so fast. One thing that is clear is that continuous innovation and continuous agility needs to be tightly integrated with secure controls to enable a resilient growth in the future. So thank you so much, Mr. Lakshminarayanan, for your time, and thank you, Hiral, for your time. And I hope the listeners also enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Shipra.
Thank you so much, Shipra.